the stretchers, the IVs, the sirens, the long procession of ambulances. In shock, we endured the irony of the funerals where the mourners, the pallbearers, and the deceased were all under 18. Now we see the after effects, the wheelchairs, the surgeries, the rehabilitation that never quite restores. Today, I'm going to be talking about the things that should be enhanced and improved under gun control in the United States today. Ladd Everett, a gun control professional, says, "We lose more than 32,000 Americans to gun violence every year in this country. That's an average of 87 deaths a day." I would like to share that personally, I'm someone who enjoys hunting. I like shooting guns at a target out at the deer lease, and before doing research, I actually was going to argue in favor of guns. I'm not necessarily against guns, but I think it's important to understand that guns are a dangerous thing, and are even more dangerous in the hands of someone who is wanting to become capable of doing harmful things. Which leads to my 3 main points today, those being background checks, online purchases, and how we use the Second Amendment. For my first main point, I'll be talking about background checks. Mark Barna, an editor at the American Public Health Association, says, in public comments on the shootings, President Donald Trump said, "Mental illness and hate pulls the trigger, not the gun. But the data shows gun availability, not mental illness." The problem today is people with mental illness. A lot of people now have mental illnesses, and it's not always going to show up in background checks. If they haven't been hospitalized, been to rehabilitation centers, or brought it to the attention of others, this recent mental illness will not show up on background checks, which is scary because a lot of people have mental illness and have harmful intentions, and the background check just won't catch it. Which leads to my next source, that saying, Jacob Sullum, a syndicated senior columnist with Reason magazine who focuses most of his writings on shrinking the realm of politics and expanding individual choice, says, "Even in the mass shootings where background checks missed key information, the issue is the adequacy of the screening process, not the killer's ability to avoid it." So another big problem is that the background checks are not thorough enough. It's not that people are necessarily hacking the system or finding cheat codes to it. It's that they aren't asking enough questions and people are getting through these background checks and missing key information. Jonathan Gatehouse, a senior correspondent for Maclean's magazine, says, while it's not clear whether the pair had come to the attention of anti-terror authorities, their arsenal, which included 2 high-powered assault rifles, 2 semi-automatic handguns, several thousand rounds of ammunition, and more than a dozen homemade pipe bombs. All of the weapons were purchased legally, and Farouk was subject to an NICS check when he bought his pistols at Annie's Get Your Gun in Corona, California, a federally licensed establishment that bills itself as the family-friendly gun store, killing 14 and injuring 21. People need to have a very valid reason to want guns in the first place, whether it's for recreational usage or concealed weapon usage. But people should not have access to assault weapons like high-powered assault rifles or handguns or things that put off several thousand rounds of ammunition. This is something that belongs in our forces like our military. And there is no reason for everyday people to have access to these type of weapons. Which leads to my next main point, that being online purchases. Online purchases and background checks go hand in hand because background checks are extremely important in online purchases. And based on this source from Ladd Everett, a gun control professional, he says part of the problem is who has the guns. We're all tired of reading stories about shooters who legally purchased firearms despite displaying 1 or more red flags that should have prevented it: a history of violent behavior, mental illness, or drug abuse. Currently, about 40% of online gun sales are conducted without any background check at all. That gives convicted felons, domestic abusers, and those with a dangerous history of mental illness a free pass to arm themselves. This is so important because online background checks are so much more important than we think they are. You're behind a screen, which makes it so much easier to lie. This kind of goes hand in hand with cyberbullying. You're behind a screen and you're capable of so much more than you would be in person because you feel strong behind the screen. Considering the fact that 40% of online gun sales go without any background check at all should be disturbing to you to hear, because that means that 40% of these people, like it says, convicted felons, domestic abusers, or dangerous mental illness histories could have access without any threat of background check to them at all. John Yoo, an American legal scholar and former government official, says, even if a court believed that the expanded background check system failed the first step, courts of appeals would still uphold it if it survived intermediate scrutiny. My question is, why is it okay to continue after failing step 1? This right here is the start of many problems. And now I'll be covering my third and final main point, that being how we use the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment pertained to protecting the independence of our country. It should not be at the heart of debate regarding gun control and is being used in a misleading way by gun proponents because they have nothing else to rely on. Sandra Alters, a former associate professor and author, says that the right of having and using arms for self-preservation and defense, this right brought to North America by the English, was exercised by the colonists against the English during the Revolutionary War and was later incorporated into the U.S. Constitution. This belongs in a history lesson, not behind a podium when we're arguing in court as to why we should be allowed to have guns. The Second Amendment was just about the colonists being able to defend themselves against the British. There was no longer a need to defend ourselves against tyranny. We are an independent country and have been for over 200 years. The Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It speaks for itself. It's obvious that it pertained to protecting the independence of our country. In summary, today I talked about how background checks, online purchases, and the Second Amendment should be enhanced under gun control. At the beginning of my speech, I quoted a speaker from workshops around the U.S. where she talked about the mothers from the shooting of Columbine who said never again to school shootings. If you could choose to be safe from gun violence by increasing your knowledge as to where we lack in protecting ourselves, why wouldn't you? Thank you.